A story about subjectivity. Dear reader, this story is written for you. Is there a well of your own in your life? Have you ever, in the depths of the night, heard that voice calling you to leave? You are welcome to leave a comment below and share your story, because every true story is a place where God says, "Let there be light." Abraham ben Eliezer stood in his grandfather's vineyard. The morning light filtered through the vines, casting dappled shadows on his face. He was 30 years old, widely recognized as a clever man in his tribe. The priests said he knew the law. The merchants said he was shrewd. Even the clan chief had praised him as wise. But Abraham knew that he had nothing. When others asked his opinion, he would say, "Rabbi, so-and-so taught this." When asked what he wanted, he would say, "Father thinks this is best." When asked if he was happy, he would smile, but that smile was borrowed from some occasion, from someone else. He was like a mirror, only reflecting others' appearances, never knowing his own face. One morning, he met a stranger in the vineyard. It was an old man dressed in a rough camel hair cloak, sitting on a stone by the winepress, barefoot, his feet stained purple with grape juice. But the old man's eyes were very bright, like two lamps. "What are you looking for?" the old man asked. "I don't know," Abraham answered honestly. The old man laughed. "You don't know what you're looking for, but you've been searching all along. That's why you can't sleep." Abraham's heart trembled. The old man had spoken his secret. Every night as he lay in the darkness, a vast emptiness rose up like a deep well. He looked down and could not see the bottom. "Who are you?" he asked. "It doesn't matter who I am," the old man said. "What matters is, who are you?" The old man pointed to a well nearby. "Where does the water in the well come from?" "From an underground spring." "How do you know there's a spring here?" "Because someone dug a well, and there's water in it, so there must be a spring below." The old man shook his head. "You're wrong. The spring is down there first, and then people dig the well. But if you never dig, you'll never know there's water down there." He looked at Abraham. "Have you ever dug a well for yourself?" Abraham fell silent. All his life he had drunk from wells others had dug, his grandfathers, his fathers, the rabbis. He had never dug a well for himself. He didn't even know if there was a spring beneath his own ground. The old man stood up, drew a bucket of water from the well, and handed it to Abraham. Genesis says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep." Have you ever thought about why God first created the formless and void? Because he wanted people to understand light can only shine on darkness. If you have never faced the formless void inside yourself, where can the light shine in? Abraham took the bucket and felt it was unusually heavy. He remembered getting lost in the wilderness when he was 5 years old. There was nothing around, just stones and sand. In that moment, for the first time, he realized he was a single, tiny existence, with no father, no rabbi, no one to tell him which way to go. He was terrified and burst into tears. From then on, he never let himself fall into that situation again. He always stayed among the crowd, always obeyed authority, always walked the path others had walked. But that 5-year-old boy still stood inside him, standing in a formless void. "I'm afraid," Abraham said. The old man nodded. "Fear is appropriate, because what you are about to face is not someone else. but yourself, and you have never met him. That night, Abraham had a dream. In the dream, he stood on a vast wilderness. Beneath his feet was cracked earth. Above his head was an endless sky. He stood alone. Then he heard a voice, not from outside, but from that formless void in his chest. The voice said, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you." He woke up drenched in sweat. His wife Sarai asked, "What's wrong?" He wanted to say, "Nothing," but the words died in his throat. In the moonlight, he looked at Sarai's face, kind, gentle, now a little confused. He told her about the dream. Sarai was silent for a moment, then asked softly, "Where do you want to go?" "I don't know." She smiled. "That's what real living is. If you knew where you are going, it would just be moving. Not knowing where you're going, that's living." 3 days later, Abraham's father Terah died. A good man who had done the right things all his life, offered sacrifices on time, was generous and hospitable, loved his children. He lived by the rules of his ancestors and died by the rules of his ancestors. But while mourning, Abraham suddenly realized his father had never lived a single day for himself. The thought cut like a knife because he saw his father's likeness in himself. On the 7th night of mourning, Abraham sat alone in his tent. The moonlight drew a silver line on the ground. He looked at that line and remembered the phrase, "Be set apart," to separate oneself from the crowd, not for pride, but to become oneself. He stood up and walked outside the tent. The sky was full of stars, like seeds God had scattered. That voice, "Is it you, God, or is it me?" he asked in his heart. There was no answer, only the silent stars. But suddenly Abraham felt that perhaps these two voices were one. Perhaps God's voice always comes through the deepest hollow of a person. But that wasn't the point. The point was that he had to choose. No one was forcing him to leave. No one told him where to go. He could stay, inherit his father's estate, and live as a respected clan leader. Or he could go, not because he should go, not because he must go, but because he wanted to go. This was the first decision in his life that truly belonged to him. He walked back into the tent and said to Sarai, "We're leaving." Sarai didn't ask where. She just nodded. "All right." They left Haran and headed south. On the 7th day they arrived at Shechem and camped by the oak of Moreh. Abraham looked at the unfamiliar land. No ancestral graves, no clan, no rabbi. Only wilderness, oaks, sky, and the voice inside him growing clearer. He began to build an altar. Sarai was confused. "What are you doing? You're just piling up stones." Abraham said, "I'm naming this path. Each stone is a choice." The first stone stood for the day he left Ur. He had taken the first step, not because anyone told him to, but because he chose to step. The second stone stood for the day he broke with his father. He had said, "I can't live in your shadow my whole life," and his father was silent for a long time, then sighed, "Go." The third stone stood for the first time he allowed himself to be lost, not immediately asking for directions, but standing there, feeling the fear, waiting for it to pass. Each stone was a separation, and each separation was a birth. But the test soon came. The herdsman of Abraham and his nephew Lot argued over pasture and water. According to tradition, as the elder, Abraham had the right to choose the best land first. But he called Lot and said, "Let there be no quarreling between us. Is not the whole land before you? If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left. Sarai's jaw dropped in surprise. For an elder to say, "You choose," to a younger was unthinkable in those days. Lot was also surprised, but he looked at the well-watered plain of the Jordan and then at the barren, rocky hill country of Canaan. And he chose the plain. Later, Sarai complained, "How could you let him choose first? He's the younger." Abraham said, "Because he needs to learn to choose, and I need to learn to let go. In the past, I did things because others told me to." Obedience and rebellion are not freedom. They're just two sides of the same coin. True freedom is that I first choose who I am and then make decisions based on that identity. Today, I chose to be a person who lets go, not because the law required me to let go, not because I wanted to appear humble, but because I chose this identity. So, I gave Lot the choice. That was my choice, not his right. Sarai was silent for a long time. Then she said, "You've changed." "Yes," said Abraham, "I am changing." Change did not move in a straight line upward. Famine came, grain withered, wells dried up. Abraham faced a dilemma: stay and lose everything, or go to Egypt and retreat to the place he had left. In the end, fear prevailed, and he went to Egypt. In Egypt, a greater fear seized him. Sarai was beautiful, and he was afraid the Egyptians would kill him to take her. So he told Sarai to say she was his sister, not his wife. This decision came from fear, not fear of the Egyptians, but fear of death, fear of becoming no one again. In that moment, he forgot that he was the one who had chosen to leave Ur, the one who had built altars, the one who had chosen to let go. He shrank back into that old, safe shell, protecting himself with lies. Pharaoh indeed took notice of Sarai and had her brought into his palace, while he treated Abraham well, giving him sheep, cattle, and servants. Abraham got the protection he wanted, but lost one thing: himself. That night, he sat alone in his tent, his hands trembling, not with fear, but with disgust. He disgusted himself. He had betrayed Sarai, betrayed trust, betrayed the person he had just begun to become. "God," he said in his heart, "I messed up." No lightning, no angel, only silence and that bottomless void inside him. The next day, Pharaoh discovered the truth and angrily drove Abraham out of Egypt. He left with a broken, shamed heart, believing he had lost everything, not just livestock and property, not just Sarai's trust, but the fragile sense of self he had so painstakingly built. But he was wrong. Back in Canaan, back to the place where he had once built an altar, Abraham did something that surprised even himself. He built another altar. He knelt before it, not because he should kneel, not because he must kneel, but because he chose to kneel. He didn't ask God for anything, nor did he confess, though he needed to confess. He simply knelt there, letting the sun warm his back, the wind touch his face, the roughness of the earth spread through his knees. He felt himself, not clan leader Abraham, not Isaac's father, not Sarai's husband, not liar, not failure. All those identities, labels, judgments fell away like clothes. He knelt there naked before God. In the wilderness, he was simply him, a person who could fear, a person who could lie, a person who could run, but also a person who could come back, a person who could build an altar, a person who could kneel, not because anyone required it, but because he chose to. That voice rose again from the formless void, clearer than before. Walk before me and be blameless. Blameless, not perfect. Wholeness means being real, hiding no longer, becoming yourself completely and without reserve, because that is exactly what God wanted you to be when He created you. Abraham wept, not with sorrow, nor with joy. It was a deeper weeping, as if the deep spring had finally been tapped, and the water surged up beyond control. He wept for a long time, until his tears ran dry, until his body was exhausted, until he felt like a stone washed clean by rain, clean, quiet, solid. He stood up and walked back to the tent. Sarai's eyes held complex emotions, anger, hurt, doubt, but also something she had never shown before. She said, "I thought you would ask me to forgive you." Abraham said, "I will not ask for your forgiveness, because I will not ask you for something I don't deserve. I lied to you, hurt you, failed you. These are facts. I will not pretend they didn't happen, nor will I erase them with, 'Forgive me.' I can only tell you this. I choose to become a person who no longer lies. I will keep making this choice until it becomes true. As for whether you forgive me, that is your choice, not my right." Sarai was silent for a very long time. The wind moved through the oaks, making a sound like a sigh. Then she spoke words that Abraham would never forget. "You have finally become a person." Many more years passed. When Abraham was 100 years old, Sarai gave him a son, and he named him Isaac. He laughs. 100-year-old father and a 90-year-old mother having a child. It was a joke in itself, a joke from God. Abraham watched Isaac grow, and his heart was filled with an emotion he had never known. Not joy. Joy was too light. Not gratitude. Gratitude was too narrow. It was something heavier, like the earth, like a foundation. This child was the fruit of his choices, not fate, not tradition, not chance. He had chosen to become a person, chosen to listen to the voice within, chosen to leave, chosen to let go, chosen to return, chosen to be real. All these choices came together and bore this fruit called Isaac. One day Isaac asked him, "Father, are you happy?" Abraham thought for a moment and said, "I'm not always happy. Sometimes I'm very afraid, very angry, very sad, very ashamed, but I am alive, fully, completely alive." Isaac didn't understand. Isn't being alive just being alive? Abraham shook his head. Most people are not alive. They are being lived. Life happens to them, rather than them living life. But when you have subjectivity, when you realize that you are the master of your own life, the maker of your own choices, the participant in your own destiny, that is when you truly begin to live. Isaac still didn't fully understand, but he kept these words in his heart. Many years later, as these words were passed down from generation to generation, they became the story of a people, the story of a civilization, a story about how a person becomes a person. The beginning of this story is Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Light does not come from outside. Light is born out of darkness. Without darkness, there is no light. Without the formless void, there is no creation. Without that abyssal, terrifying nothing place, nothing truly real can ever grow. In the last years of his life, Abraham finally understood the words of the old man he had met in the vineyard. Have you ever dug a well for yourself? He had dug it. That well was very deep, so deep the bottom could not be seen, but the water was living, sweet, and welling up to eternal life. Prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord of heaven and earth, I come before you, not because I should come, not because I must come, but because I choose to come. Thank you for creating the formless void and darkness. Thank you for not skipping a step and making a perfect world right away. Because it is that darkness that lets me see the light. It is that emptiness that makes me long to be filled. It is that moment of not knowing who I am that begins my journey to find you and also to find myself. Thank you for giving me the ability to choose. I often abuse it, using it to escape, to lie, to hide, to please, to perform. But you have never taken this gift back. You let me see my true self in every wrong choice and taste freedom in every right one. Thank you for placing a voice inside me. That voice is small, often drowned out by the voices of the world, the flesh, and the devil. But it never disappears. It calls to me in the wilderness, wakes me in the deep night, reminds me in failure. You are not a slave, you are a son. You are not a tool, you are a purpose. You are not a mirror, you are a portrait. Lord, help me to keep digging the well, deeper, deeper, down to the spring. Let me no longer be satisfied with drinking from others' wells, but dig out the river of living water you have placed within me. Give me the courage to face the formless void inside me. Do not let me fill it with busyness, entertainment, achievements, or relationships. Instead, let me stand quietly and bravely beside that abyss, waiting for your spirit to move upon the waters, waiting for you to say, "Let there be light." Let me become a whole person, not a perfect person, but an integrated person, not a person without failures, but a person who chooses to return after every failure, not a person without fear, but a person who moves forward with fear nonetheless. I thank you for all the choices in my life, the good ones, the bad ones, the ones that made me rejoice, the ones that made me suffer, because each choice has shaped me. Each choice has told me who I am. Each choice has brought me to this place today, kneeling before you, not as a slave before his master, but as a son before his father. Finally, Lord, I thank you for that voice inside me. That voice is your voice, and it is also my own voice. When I learn to discern it, listen to it, and live it out, I become the person you have wanted me to be since the beginning of creation. May I no longer be lived, but live truly, wholly, freely, for your glory and for my dignity as a human being. In the name of the one who was fully human, your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.